Welcome to the Church of Obelisk. A little while ago I made a guide on ability draft, which is still mostly up to date, but of course 733 has come, and the biggest change for AD, aside from the map changes obviously, is the introduction of this universal hero category. So in this video I want to talk about how do you play a universal hero differently compared to one of the regular attributes, and in particular we're going to take a look at which of these heroes are actually good right clickers, which can actually make good use of all that bonus damage you get from stats as a universal hero. So being a universal hero obviously means that you get 0.7 damage as of right now per attribute. So this means that every time you get +1 to all attributes, that is 2.1 damage instead of just the regular 1 damage on a regular hero, which means every branch you buy just gives you a whole bunch of extra damage. So you can just buy something like this and you already get a ton of bonus damage. This is +7 stats, which is 14.7 bonus damage. So you can take a hero that has very mediocre base damage and make them hit pretty hard. So every branch gives you +2.1 damage, circlet is 4.2, and a ground is 8.4, which is actually almost as much as Blades of Attack, which costs the same. So if you're a universal hero, you want to buy a bunch of stat items. Even if you're playing a support, you can, for example, just buy a couple of branches that's already a lot of bonus damage, and you probably want to buy a wand anyway, because even if you do play a support, you're going to be right-clicking quite a lot on the laning stage, especially if you're a ranged hero. This damage from stats is obviously most relevant on right-click carry heroes, but even if you play some other role, it's still nice to get some extra bonus damage from an item like Holy Locket or Dagon, which just give a little bit of extra damage on you. But even if you're not a right-click carry, you still want to assign slightly higher value to items like Wand, which probably want to buy anyway, something like Holy Locket, Dagon is some extra damage, Phylactery gives you some extra damage, and of course Rod of Atos, huge amount of stats there. Of course you don't want to buy a Dagon just because it gives you 15 right click damage, but it's a little bit of an extra bonus. Now let's talk about actually playing a right click carry. First of all, consider not doing that. A lot of times in AD games, people just pick too many right clickers. You probably want only one right-click hero on your team, maybe two, but not more than that. And more than in any other role, as a right-clicker, you want to have a good hero model. That is essential. As a support, it doesn't matter very much what your hero model is. Any hero can play support. Some heroes are a little better than others, but even on the worst model in the game, you can support alright if you pick good abilities. So let's review what makes a hero a good right-click model. Let's start with what is probably the best model in the entire game in AD. That's Nature's Prophet. So the most important factor is range. Ranged heroes just make inherently better right-clickers. And the more range, the better. Nature's Prophet here has 600 range, which is pretty high, so that's great. Second thing you want to look at is the attribute. Nature's Prophet is int, which is actually the worst attribute for right clicking. The best one is universal, second one is agility, and then strength, and then int. So being a universal or agile hero is a big advantage when you want to build a right clicker. What makes Nature's Prophet so really great is his stat gain. Look at this, this is absurdly high. His lowest stat gain is 2.6. So as a right clicker, we want to look at our primary stats and our agi, especially. Those are the most important stats, followed then by strength, and then followed by int on a non-int hero. So if we add this all up, this is 9.5 total stats per level. That is absurdly high. So +7 is already pretty good on a non-universal hero, but 9.5 is just crazy. Then you want to look at movement speed. 295 is slightly below average. but you get 1.5 base attack time. The normal value here is 1.7. Anything below that means the hero is going to attack faster. Anything above that means your hero is going to attack slower. An important point to make here is that whether your hero is played as a carry in regular Dota is not important. There are some heroes that are carries in regular Dota but just should not be played as carries in AD. For example, something like a Sven, right? He's fast, that's what he's got going for him. His stat gains are decent, but his melee, big downside. His strength, another downside. Then he's got 1.9 base attack time. That is significantly slower. This hero is great as an offlane or support, but Sven should not be played as a carry in AD. And of course you have the reverse as well. HOODWINK is usually played as a support in regular Dota, but she can be quite a strong right-clicker here in AD. Because even though she has very bad base attack time, she's got excellent stat gains, she's fast, she's ranged, she's got a lot going on for her. So now, which universal heroes are actually good right-clickers? First of all the melee heroes are pretty much out. There's some that you can make work as a right-click carry, like Marcy or Nyx or Pango, but it's not ideal. You really want to look at the ranged heroes. The first hero that really stands out is Techies. He doesn't have the greatest stat gain, in particular the agi gain is atrocious, and most of the stats here are pretty standard, but he's got extremely high range. I think it's the highest range in the entire game. And on top of that, he's got 252 damage as level 25 talent. Now it's important not to overvalue this level 25 talent, because many games don't even get there. And even if you do get there, it's very, very late. But it's on top of an already very, very solid right-click hero that even if you didn't have this talent, you would still be a fairly decent right-clicker. Next we have BANE. He's got very strong level 1 stats. He's got high attribute gain. And there's nothing particularly special about him. It's just like solid across the board. His range is not the highest, but 400 range is still pretty good. His movement speed is not the highest, but it's pretty good. So everything is just like pretty good here, but he's universal, and that's just a big advantage. It's so much extra damage. And you'll find in general, just because being universal is such a big advantage, universal heroes just tend to have worse stats, but BANE stats are pretty strong. Another strong candidate is SNAPFIRE. Of course, SNAPFIRE has always been great in AD if you get Lil Shredder, because that ability is absurd once you get to level 20 and even more absurd in 25 with those talents. The reason SNAPFIRE is not played as a right-clicker in regular Dota is because all her other abilities don't support right-clicking, and she doesn't become a good right-clicker until she's level 20. But in AD, you can first pick Lil Shredder and then probably still get at least 1 or 2 decent right-click abilities after that, making SNAPFIRE just a very, very strong hero. That was the case even before 733, but now it's even more strongly the case, because you get decent stat gain here. Agi is very low, unfortunately, but to make up for that, you have fast base attack time. You got decent range, 500 range, mobility is decent. So if you get Lil Shredder, she's like one of the strongest right-clickers in the game. But even if you don't, she's still decent. And if you don't have any really strong right-click hero in your team, make SNAPFIRE a carry. Another hero worth mentioning is Chen. He just has pretty solid stat gains. He's got very high range. He's reasonably fast. And he's just all around very, very solid. So even though he's a support in regular Dota, all of his abilities are support abilities. If you pick up some nice right-click abilities, he can be a very strong carry. Another good candidate is Lone Druid, who doesn't have the best stat gains, but he's got high range, he's got fast base attack time, and he's got excellent, excellent movement speed. 2 heroes I would in general avoid as right-clickers in AD are Dark Willow and Winter Wyvern. They can be very strong if they get their signature ability, so Dark Willow with Shadow Realm and Winter Wyvern with the Arctic Burn, which is just in general one of the strongest abilities in But if you don't get those, then you should not be playing them as right-clickers, because their stats are nothing special. They're pretty slow. Like Winter Wyvern, there's nothing really going for her. She doesn't have much range. She's pretty slow. Stat gains are okay, but nothing special. And then Dark Willow, she does have faster base attack time, but her stat gains are bad, and she's fairly slow, and also doesn't have that much range. So what kind of items do you buy on your universal carry? Well, as starting items, you typically want to buy branches and circlets. So if you're a melee hero, you buy a set of tangos, 2 branches, 2 circlets, and your quelling blade that spends all your starting gold. As a ranged hero, for example, you can go with a tango, double circlet, and triple branch, leaving 50 gold left over. And then you can go ahead and make a wand. You can upgrade your circlets into probably Wraith Bands, but you might also buy Nulls or Bracers if you need a mana regen or HP regen. You probably want to buy Power Treads, and Rod of Atos is excellent on a universal carry because you get so many stats. It's a total of 48 stats, which works out to be about 34 damage. And on top of that, of course, you get the active, which is never bad. Any hero could use some extra disable. And the build-up just works out so well. You can get those 2 crowns early on, actually. Even if you want to go for Maelstrom first, you can throw in a crown or 2 to get stronger early game. Then you can go Maelstrom, or you just finish the Rod of Atos first if you want to play more aggressively. And then you go for a fairly early Gleipnir. Another great item is Hurricane Pike, which of course has Dragon Lance as a component, which on a universal hero gives even slightly more damage than on a edgy hero. And then Hurricane Pike gives even more to all stats, and just a bunch of stuff that a ranged right-clicker wants to have, and in universal heroes it's especially strong. Another item to mention is Manta Style, which also gives a bunch of stats, especially edgy, which of course on the right-clicker is usually the most important stat. And the illusions are especially strong on a universal hero because you tend to have more base damage, and of course works really well together with other stat items. The biggest stat item in the game is obviously Skadi, which gives 22 to all attributes, which means on a universal hero you get something like 46 damage out of it instead of just 22. And then we also have Lincoln Sphere, which has 16 all stats, which is an extra 17 or 18 damage compared to a non-universal hero. All that being said, you don't want to go too heavy on the stat items. Right? Stat items have higher value on a universal hero, but if you want the most bang for your buck in terms of right-clicking, regular damage items are still going to be superior. Your Daedalus, your Desolator, your Moonshard, Nullifier, MKB, all these items are still going to be great on your universal right-click heroes. So those are the basics of playing universal heroes in AD. If you want to see more AD content, please let me know in the comments. And before you go, click on the top video to watch my full AD guide. Or if you want to trust the YouTube algorithm, click on the other video, and all is willing, I'll see you there.